Hello and welcome to episode 349 of the 21st Century Work-Life podcast, where we talk about how the world of work and our attitudes to work are changing. And this is another What's Going On episode, and we are recording on 13th of February 2024. My name is Pilar from Virtual Not Distant.
And I'm Maya Middlemiss from Remote Work Europe.
Yay! I wish listeners could have seen you, because you actually looked at the camera when you said that. It was great.
And we're not even recording the videos.
But you can't help it, can you? When the camera is on,
You're on. Yeah.
It's an attraction. Oh, I also, Maya, do you know the Spanish saying? So today we're recording on, it's Tuesday the 13th, which in Spain is a day of bad luck. And they say, 13 martes, ni te cases ni te embarques, which means Tuesday 13th, don't get married and don't get on a ship or a whatever.
All these dangerous things. Yes. I mean, I've not heard the expression,
No?
but I have heard the Tuesday 13th thing, I think. Yes.
Yeah.
Is it a Shakespearean Ides of March thing or no? Because that would only be 1 month. Where does this even come from?
I don't know where Tuesday 13th comes from. That's a really good, I did look it up and then I didn't. So maybe I'll look it up.
We have Friday the 13th in the UK.
Yes, that's funny.
I suppose we just have to try and hang bad luck on some excuse and blame it on something on the calendar or whatever.
In Spain, it's earlier in the week. You don't want it to be on Friday. That's really bad
true.
to have bad
Let's get
luck
it
on
out of the way
Fridays.
on Tuesday, then you can enjoy your Friday. That definitely.
So, we're not going into a whole cultural thing, but I did want to say, even before we start, now that we brought Spanish into it, that I did record recently an episode in Spanish for Adventures in Podcasting with the guys from La Gran Renuncia. And they had such an interesting story about how they met and the whole remote work thing that I'm thinking of publishing it on this feed as well. But I'm looking at how to best do the dubbing. Whether to bring in a classical voiceover thing that I would do, of course, where you hear them and then I come in over in English, or try something like 11 Labs to clone their voice and get them to speak in English.
Ooh, that'd be weird.
So anyway, that's why my mind is all over the place on all over the language stuff.
Yeah,
and I have to stop saying stuff as well. I've
really,
yeah.
Is that something you think you say too much?
I do say it a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we can't. If you start overthinking these things that you say too much, you won't be able to say anything at all.
Yes, or I'll end up saying it even more. Right. Okay. Well, we've gone off on one more than often. Sorry for derailing.
We haven't even started yet.
We have an episode all about digital culture, and the reason why this came to mind is my husband was applying for a job around digital arts, digital animation for a university. And they said, you need to have knowledge of this, and digital culture. And I was like, okay, I have a sense of what that means, but what is it? And is it a phrase that's been used? And I hadn't heard of it before like that. Maya, had you?
No, I don't think it's something that we could say has a widely understood common definition. I think it's probably a phrase that's used to describe something that's remote first or technology first or online first, but I bet it's being used in a lot of different ways by different organizations for different reasons.
And the one we've picked is this article by Slack, which is called "What is Digital Culture?"
And to ask somebody, Slack are quite knowledgeable about this stuff.
They're good ones. And it was published on the 29th of July of 2022. And, well, the subtitle is, so they say, what is digital culture is the title. And then the teams best prepared for change use modern digital communication tools, feel comfortable learning new ones, and continually adapt how they work. So what did you think when you read the article just at the beginning or when you came on it?
I still felt woolly. I didn't feel, I thought, I saw you put the link in our notes and I thought, Slack will have nailed it. If I just read this, I would know exactly what is commonly understood by the phrase digital culture. And Yeah, I mean, they unpacked some examples of what it might look like, but I don't know. We've heard so much over the last few years about digital transformation, and we're all at different points on that transformation, which always feels very dynamic. Things are always shifting. We can't really say that we're finished with doing that because we're still transforming and the technology is moving quickly. So I wonder if the digital culture is kind of what's left behind once that wave of transformation recedes, that it's kind of what you transformed into.
Yeah, that's a good way of seeing it.
But it's going to be different everywhere because of that, surely.
Yes. I was talking to someone today and we were talking about AI and Copilot and the fact that they had introduced Copilot into her organization. And she was thinking about, well, she was saying she hasn't had time to play with it. And also there hasn't been like a way of introducing it. And I was thinking, well, if we're waiting for digital transformation to get to our digital culture, we're never going to get there.
Yeah. It's at what point do we say we're done transforming so we can start to identify what our culture is, because a lot of it's going to be those things that have spontaneously emerged. I don't know, you can't sort of mandate or dictate culture. We're going to have this kind of culture. So it is going to be a certain amount observationally, whatever you do to try and nurture certain aspects of it. And if you're still transforming and changing things, it's going to be quite difficult to see what it is.
Yeah, I suppose the digital culture for me, having this conversation, would be about how we're behaving as a result of working with technology or being technology heavy. And also what our relationship with technology is within the organization. So I think it's all those behaviors. I think one of the definitions was digital culture is a workplace shaped and influenced by digital tools and technologies. So I find it interesting that it's shaped and influenced by the tech, which in a way is what we're always saying. Whoa.
Yeah, and that feels a little bit like it's defining itself by referencing itself. I don't know, that still feels like an editor would say, no, come on.
Yeah.
Give me different descriptions or phrases. Don't rely on saying, well, it's what you get when you use digital stuff.
The other thing got me thinking, I've been reading recently a book called The Rise of the Frontline Worker. And it's so interesting because the whole premise is about the fact that a lot of the digital transformation has happened with knowledge workers. And with a big explosion in remote work, knowledge workers have everything that they need to work, and they're very advanced. But the frontliners are feeling that divide.
Yes,
are feeling that divide
ever,
more.
I'm sure.
And so there's a wonderful anecdote in the book which talks about a woman that had to, and I don't know, this is only like a few years ago. I mean, the book was only written in the last year or so, or the last 2 years, about this woman who actually had to travel for about an hour on Sundays to her workplace. She wasn't a knowledge worker. She had to travel physically to find out her rota. So because it was posted on a notice board.
A piece of paper somewhere.
Yes. So I think, and then I went, what, only like a few years ago? I mean, we're not even talking pre-pandemic, and so I wonder as well whether, I always think of digital culture and I think of us, knowledge workers, but I wonder whether it's a workplace that has a digital culture or that promotes a digital culture has to extend beyond their knowledge workers.
And it really has to think about being inclusive with that, because actually, if that frontline worker doesn't have a company-issued device to access things digitally, then how do they get that information? Where is it shared or stored or alerted? At least if they go and look on the notice board, that's where my shifts are, that's where they've always been. If it's going to be somewhere different and it's not somewhere that they're kind of really enabled or supported to access easily, they need to think about all of that. If it's giving everybody a tablet or having a shared digital space that everybody at least knows about and goes and checks. So yeah, it does get to aspects of culture that go way beyond the technology.
And it's also making me think that how how divisive it can be just in organizations where some people can work remotely and others can't, and the people who can are trying to nurture a remote first environment. Even things like when you build communities of practice online, the knowledge worker is in front of the computer for most of the time. So actually to pop in and out and check out conversations, be involved is very easy. Whereas someone whose work doesn't involve being stuck to a device all day will maybe be able to check in comfortably once every 3 or 4 days, and how they can feel completely left out of the loop if everyone else is. So I think, yeah, that's making me think about that as well.
They might even have a very differently developed sense of how to pay attention, and if you're used to, say, managing a multi-site location by going to each place and having a one-to-one interaction or observation, to then transition that to keeping a bit of an eye on everything all the time by using data visualizations and tools and so on. It's a complete shift in how you take in information and process it and notice it. So, yeah, these are all things that may or may not have been considered. I suspect not, that are going to be, in many cases, bolted on afterwards, especially with the people that are still out there in the front line, serving the public, fixing the machines, looking after people and so on. All the people who still had to go and work during the pandemic while the knowledge workers were safely quarantining at home.
I think that's an interesting aspect of a workplace which has been shaped and influenced by digital tools and technologies. I always think, we're trying to get it to shape in a way that is, again, conducive to inclusivity, and all of that takes so much time. And sometimes, like you say, we don't think about this, and it's only when the disconnection happens or the feeling of not being included happens that then we go, okay, this is what we need to fix. This is where this gap is. So they've got they talk about some of the things that you might be able to find in, I'm going to say, in a place with a positive digital culture, because this is another thing, is that the language around culture is always about having a strong culture, but we want to have a positive, strong culture.
It's not a case of how digital is it.
Yes. Because it's got things like the use of digital communications to make work faster and easier. That would be in a positive. Build genuine connections, automate repetitive processes, create inclusive online environments, and enable meaningful online customer experiences. So these are the aspirations, aren't they?
So it's talking about a sort of multi-channel blend of communications and workflow and everything.
Yeah, and a use. I like that they say that to build genuine connections through technology, because this is, of course, the thing we're finding is that everyone's wanting to move technology to one side when we're talking about building connections.
Yes, so it's saying use it intentionally for that, not just for the work. That if it's a digital first culture, then that's where the connections will be built.
Yeah. And some of the things they talk about, how it can improve a company by openness and transparency. Again, that's a big one. Maybe we can come back to that one. But it talks about greater agility and adaptability, enhanced collaboration and innovation, and enhanced data collection. And you've got something to add around the enhanced data collection here.
Yeah, I just thought we don't need more data, do we? A very digital culture in any organization will mean that there is a ton of data available to us at all times. So I think where the technology can be more helpful is in making that data useful and just in time and relevant and appropriate. And we now have digital tools that are very good at doing that. We don't just need a ton of data. We need insight, and something that's actionable, predictive insight, prescriptive insight, and so on. So let's just not bury people in data.
I think it goes back to their subtitle where in the article, which said the teams best prepared for change use modern digital communication tools, feel comfortable learning new ones, and continually adapt how they work. Yeah. So I think that's really interesting to think of. It's not just that a lot of the work is getting done through the tech, but there is this constant revisiting of how the tech
that agility working. And sort of, it sounds like a very almost experimental mindset of let's try this and let's see if that doesn't work, then it's nobody's fault. And just a kind of a mindset of a bit of experimentation and adaptability, because the technology is always changing. And if your digital culture depends on one app or one workflow or something, then it could end up not really progressing and developing.
Yeah. And so they have a couple of examples, which, to be honest, we have to remember that this is a piece of content marketing from Slack.
Yes.
For all the information they put out there. And so they mention a couple of examples, and I thought it's worth sharing them because for me, they bring up lots of questions about what it takes to create a positive digital culture. So the first one they've got is TD Ameritrade, which is an online stock trading company. And they talk about how they had 1,500 remote people before the pandemic, and they had to shift to 10,000. So I imagine everyone remote. And it talks about how they implemented Slack, which they already had. And I imagine those 1,500 plus many others were already using it, because it's not just the remote people, hopefully, that were using it. And that's what they talk about, that there was, I found, actually, let me pass over to you. What did you find interesting about this example?
Well, what's standing out for me is I was talking to you just before we hit record about some work I've been doing with a client who makes compliance software, and their target market is precisely this, regulated financial industries. And of course, those people who were not previously remote will likely have been the actual traders who are having the conversations with clients that have to be really carefully tracked and monitored and controlled, and that they're used to doing it on a trading floor and calling out their orders and everything like that. So there were huge cultural shifts then, when all of that had to either you stop doing it or you do it online, and we have to ship this stuff. So if they already were using Slack for certain kinds of communication, they then had to adjust to using it for the kind of industry regulated communications. There were probably loads of different complicated layers of, can we do this remotely? Is it safe? Is it compliant? I wonder if that's why the stock market was all over the place in those early days. It wasn't about the lockdowns. It was about the logistics of the stock markets still actually keeping going somehow. And all of this is going on in the background, where, the people are having to make these huge transitions. And this is a massive team. I mean, this is remote at scale then. Yeah. And even just physically shipping the equipment. And if those people weren't used to doing any work at home because they always went to an exchange, then they wouldn't have had the secured second devices and things like that. And less than 10% remote to start with. So they probably just didn't even have the provisioning. And that was when you couldn't buy stuff as well. Yeah. So, it's just fascinating to see. And it's great that Slack reports this. So this is a big success story. But I bet, the day-to-day was probably incredibly fraught and complicated and fascinating.
I hadn't thought of that. I have to say that when I saw it, I was like, oh, well, they already used Slack before, so what's the issue? But actually, you're right. It's not the same to be using. And we know that a lot of these digital tools, especially the chatty ones, have been mainly used for informal things and very team-based things. And to be honest, a lot of the time not taken seriously, like proper communication channels. But you're right that in having to then deal with privacy and laws and what can I say, what can I not, can Slack see my messages, all this kind of thing that we have with all the different apps.
And even, this is just talking about internal communications as well. How did they communicate with their customers through all of this, with their brokers, with their funds, with everything? So I wonder what was going on there really, but they did it somehow.
I wish they'd gone into a bit more detail because, I know it is what it is, but I really wish that they'd gone into a bit more detail because it's, there's so many questions, like you say. So something that I found interesting, and I think this is a good lesson for anyone who is wondering what is happening with their internal communication, especially the top to bottom, the wide company announcements and things like that, of where there's so many emails. And they're saying that one of the things they saw was that there was more engagement with company-wide messages when they moved from email to Slack with 50% email readership, 50% of email readership to 99% when they put things in the announcement channel.
Yeah.
And for me, of course, because you're giving people the opportunity when you're putting it of course, people can check emails when they want. I understand that. But it's very different to go into Slack, into the announcement channel to look at what's going on rather than have all these emails coming and mixing. All the emails are mixing in your inbox.
Even strictly corporate email, it's still going to be full of stuff that you haven't organized or chosen or invited or anything else. And to find that, there's one from the CEO there, I must read that at some point, and it's there in the list and I'll get to it when I get to it. Whereas if it's in an announcement channel that's only used for that immediate, really high stakes company-wide stuff, you're much more likely to, you haven't got to open something. It's an alert that just kind of pops up and you have a little red notification that something's in the senior announcement channel. Then it makes total sense that's going to get read immediately.
I hope they all don't all have their alerts on.
No, but for that channel, they probably do. Whereas
Maybe,
the noise
right.
in all the other, I think the fact that these tools are really granular now and you can make sure, I don't want to miss something from my manager or from her manager, or you can settle that up so that certain things will get your attention. And you can do all that in your inbox as well. But let's face it, most of us don't.
Yeah. I think as well, the giving a space that people can go into and you can decide and then give it your attention, because an email coming in, you've got it there, but again, it's just so different. Whereas you can go to a channel and go, okay, I'm mindfully going today to look at these kind of channels, the ones where I'm passive on them because I have 10 minutes, but I've got time to read them. And I find that really... Yeah, I liked that because this is kind of what we're saying and it looks like it works.
Yeah, well, they reduce their use of email by 30% after 6 months. So in any context, that has to be good.
Yeah.
I would love to reduce my emails by 30% or...
Well, it depends what happens. I mean, I'd be interested to see if there was the 30% drop in email meant that they were overflowed with Slack messages, or that... when you, again, sending an email, you're just in your inbox and you click and you see your own message and you write your message. But in Slack, you have to go into the channel to write your message and you see that there's already loads of stuff there.
Context, yeah.
And you might think, actually, do I want to add to this, or I'll just be more
somebody
brief?
already answered my question that I was going to...
Shall I thread it instead of a new message? So
it should be much higher quality, a higher bandwidth conversation. I saw a meme recently about email. God knows where I saw it, social media somewhere. And it said that, I think it was a tweet, and it's when you finish an email and write yours at the end of it, people answer. It's not short for yours sincerely or yours faithfully. It's just saying yours, your problem now. I'm batting this back to you. It's now yours in your inbox. So you deal with it. And I thought, that makes, wow, yes. And I think a lot of people probably do use email a bit like that. It's going back to Cal Newton's The Hive Mind. People do kind of literally bat something out of their inbox with sort of adding one minor question or something that doesn't really move things on, but then makes it the other person's problem till they reply. Whereas if that is in an open threaded conversation and a message somewhere, then you might not need to ask that because it's already obvious, or it's been answered, or there's a lot of people have reacted to that same question, so it actually is important, or whatever. So it's much more clarity rather than just go, no, I'm going to kick this one into the long grass of a reply all.
Yes. Yeah, and that's another sign that that there is a positive digital culture as well. We're really understanding, making the most out of these platforms. So there's another one, and then there was another one where I don't know, the one with Doc Spring, which it's more of the same, really. It's how they implemented Slack and everything was wonderful, although they do talk about files and things, not just messages with this one. But what I found really interesting about this example is that it says that Doc Spring is a company that helps to automate workflows, but their own systems were inefficient. And it's just typical of people who are building something. It's a bit like, to be honest, a lot of even Slack, they built this wonderful tool that was perfect for remote work, but they weren't a remote company. Yes. So I found it's always like that.
Oh, it's almost a cliche, isn't it? Like the builder's house falling down, or the the writer with no website because she hasn't got around to finishing it.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, so that's that example. Then this message arrived on my LinkedIn feed. I don't know if one of my contacts like it or stuff. I know I don't know the person who posted it, but I thought it was worth bringing to the listeners. So I'm going to read it out. It's from Joanne Westenberg, and she says, "Modern work. You get a message in Slack with a link to the Confluence doc to prep for the meeting on Zoom, where you take notes in Notion and track project progress on Monday and then update the Trello. And you get to the end of the week, and instead of doing anything, you've just moved bits of information around in 17 different databases, and each one costs $15 a month per user."
That's absolutely spot on. I mean, that made me roar with laughter, but also wince at the same time because it's just so true.
Yeah.
This is a symptom of our digital culture gone crazy. And is it because everybody wants to own the digital culture? Everybody wants to be it, the likes of Google Workspace or Microsoft or Slack or whatever. Everybody's wants to be the hub of your culture and integrate with everything else. So you end up having to have all these things. And actually, you probably could do everything just in Microsoft or just in Notion but it's not good at all of the things that it can do.
Yeah, so you've got to add little bits and pieces.
Yeah, and it would be better if it just did the one thing and got the per user per month cost down a little bit, or bundled it or something, so that you didn't have to have all these subscriptions and then add another user every time you want to loop somebody into your worksheet or something.
I think the problem is that we forget that we used to be able to do knowledge work without all these apps.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is the problem, and that, and I'm talking maybe for myself, that I think that a Google Doc with a list of things to do that I can duplicate is not good enough. I have to have Trello, which I love, of course. But all these things, or that if I want to prep for the meeting, again, a Google Doc is not good enough. I have to do it in Notion because it looks more slick.
Yeah. And yet we run this whole podcast through a shared Google Doc every time. We just need somewhere to dump our knowledge and then, refer to it. And there is definitely, I think there's a huge aspect of displacement behavior when you've got all these things to do. If you can just organize it better, it will all definitely, and then you've spent the whole week moving bits of information around. And it's like, I think there was a time in my life where if I felt overwhelmed or panicked, I'd sit down and make a to-do list and get a piece of paper and a pen and write down what I have to do. And now that list will have to be in an app, or it's going to be a whole new Notion database and dashboard to try and get a grip on my things. And by the time I've spent the whole day on that dashboard, I haven't done any of the things.
Yeah. So that could be a digital culture gone mad, and not a very positive one. You've got talking about messed up digital cultures. One of our friends, Judy, on Virtual Team Talk, shared a Reddit thread which said, "I'm about to enter into a passive-aggressive war with a coworker. What is the worst microphone for Teams? I need a microphone that works with Teams that will pick up all of the room sounds, desk squeaking, keyboard clicks, and especially someone talking 15 or so feet away. Preferably something cheap and plausible." And someone said, "I have a colleague who sips coffee during meetings wearing AirPods. I think he'd be mortified if he knew how that sounds." And I'm really sorry, but being like a very, I don't know what the word would be for me as a podcaster and my audio quality, just use the one on your computer like most people do.
Yeah, it doesn't get much worse than that, especially if it's next to the keyboard clacking away or
the webcam one.
Yeah.
That's bad enough a lot of the time.
Yes. I can remember early meetings with a colleague who used to have one of those headset mics on a boom, and she had it sort of up near her nose, and you could actually hear her breathing.
Yeah.
You sort of wait and see whose light's going on when they're not talking, and suddenly you realise you're hearing every single breath. But that was a few years ago, but it still happens.
It still happens. But all those Zoom and Teams and even Riverside, the recording platforms, they all have now the echo cancellation, which is also, drives the audio engineers mad because it's processing the audio.
Yeah, they don't want that done. But for most of us, just for the quality of a meeting, it's, or even dare I say, recording a podcast when you say to your guests, please make sure you've got a decent mic and that you've got a quiet environment and all of that. And then they show up on their phone or whatever. At least the software now does a lot of the work to make it at least bearable, even if the engineers don't like it when they've then got to blend it in with something much cleaner.
Yeah. And you shared this in the Remote Work Europe community? Yeah,
it was in the Spain group. I knew we had, it was a good Monday morning. Can anybody relate? We had one answer we got. Omnidirectional microphone patterns will pick up everything in the room. So you want to find a microphone built to the specification and a separate gain on volume knob to really ruin the other person's day. So thank you, Brian, for that comment. And I think it made a lot of people smile. I love it when you dig into the comments, you find out people take it so much further. I think that's our true digital culture, is what happens below the line. And once you start reading the comments and they build off each other, what terrible things people are going to do to each other. It's a sign of our times.
I can see Reddit being like this rabbit hole. I've signed up, but I don't go in.
No, I read it comes up increasingly in Google search results, which is interesting. Quite often when you need to know something, I'm seeing a lot more Reddit responses. I'm not sure why that is, but it's somewhere that I look for sort of, I don't know, almost like gossip type answers or popular culture or something, but I would never dream of joining in a conversation there. I think it's just way too toxic, a whole lot of it. So it's better to observe from a distance.
So as we wrap up our conversation around digital culture, do you think this is going to create some new jobs? Or?
Well, I think going back to the software, we do need people who are going to get better at specifying this stuff, and because I think an awful lot of that, it was really funny, that LinkedIn post, but it does reflect a very genuine problem, and the reason it exists is because this stuff kind of evolves, and you start off with one thing and then it doesn't quite do the other thing that you suddenly need, and you get another app and okay, there's an API and they work together, and that's fine, and now I'm paying for them both, and then you need another thing. And whereas if you started from what will I totally need to do, what do I expect this business plan, this team, this activity to require, and then what would be the best solution for all of it, I don't think enough of us do that. And I don't know who I would ask to help me figure that out and to be totally across all the changes. Because if you go to any of the software vendors, as you said, all the comments on that post were people saying, use our thing does all the things. And of course they all kind of do. But some of them do some of the things really well and other things really badly, or they will integrate with some aspects of a tool but not others. And I sometimes wish there was just some magical software fairy godmother who would come along and say, just install this.
And then I suppose I think the missing piece as well as that is, well, one is we know that many organizations go under the Microsoft umbrella and then navigate their way, and now with Copilot and everything. But I think the missing piece as well with this is then, okay, we need to look at our behaviors around this and how our behaviors are going to change and how they're not going to change.
Yeah.
And that's how we create that positive digital culture.
Yeah, and I think some of these solutions like Copilot, and also there's the Notion AI sort of search everywhere thing, they're kind of acknowledgements that the tools have got too complex. So you need a layer on top of it to say, how do I just do this? Or where can I just find that? Because it's all in there somewhere, and you know it can do it, and you know that there's something in a menu or somewhere that you can find it. But actually, you need an AI to help you just navigate where the hell to find the thing you made last week.
Right. Well, listeners, we'd love to know what you thought. You can send us an email.
No, don't send us email. It'll just disappear into the inbox and never be seen.
Oh, send an email. Pilar@virtualnotdistant.com, or you can send something through the contact form at virtualnotdistant.com, which will go to an email.
Don't tell people that.
Oh, sorry.
Forms are magic.
Which will be magically transplanted to our brains without even reading it. That'll be great. It will ping in our brains. But we'd love to hear from you what you think about this. How do you define digital culture? Do you think your workplace has a positive digital culture? Have you got a personal positive digital culture? How do you work with technology? Send us all of that. So on other news, so Maya and listeners, I have been working on the working from home chapter of my book that mixes Shakespeare and remote work. And I finished it and I ran it by Claude, which is Claude AI, which is the other generative AI that is out there. That's really, I really like it for analysis and things like that more than ChatGPT. And I said to Claude, I've got this essay. What do you think? And one of the things it said to me, it said, oh, you've said things like the fact that restaurants are more empty now on Fridays in Soho. And maybe you could find some data to support that. So I said, oh, thanks, Claude. I'm going to look for that. So I Googled something around that. And I found this article from the 17th of September 2023 on City AM. And I know it's not current, but it's enough. And I saw something I hadn't seen before. I wonder whether you had. And they have this acronym, which is TWAT, which is TWAT, for those who only go into the office on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays.
I have a horrible feeling it was Boris Johnson who said that as a pejorative, trying to get people back to work or something, and probably thought he was absolutely hilarious at the time.
I thought, well, that is just terrible. Anyway, the article said that the work from home economy has just changing. It's actually the title is something around the winners and losers of London's work from home economy, the city, the wharf, and the burbs. And I really like the article that it says the winners and losers. It's not just everyone is saying, oh, the restaurants are falling. No, the restaurants in town.
People still want to go out. Surprise, surprise.
Yes, yeah. And actually, that article was saying that people are going more, that what they have noticed is there's been an increase in happy hour on Thursdays after work. Thursday's the new Friday, so less restaurants. But then, as I was searching that, I then saw an article that had been published 4 hours before my search from The Telegraph on the 12th of February, 2024. And I wasn't able to access it because it's behind a paywall, but the headline said, the tide has turned in bosses' battle against working from home. Offices are becoming increasingly confident in their crackdown on home workers. It's good they're cracking down on home workers, those terrible beasts.
Yeah. Oh, dear. Well, the thing is, Johnson was using these pejorative terms 2 years ago, and people still aren't trotting back to the office, otherwise they wouldn't have to release these new articles in the Telegraph this week.
Yeah.
Things change, cultures shift, the ways people behave shift. And as you pointed out, even things like hospitality, it's just spread it around. People still want to go out. It's reshaping our cities and our cultures. They're still going to be winners and losers, and these are long-term second, third, fourth order effects. But I love the idea that people are going out in their local towns, these 15-minute cities. They're not having to get night buses and taxis and things. They can just stroll down to wherever. Well, hopefully it'll soon be warm enough in London to go and sit outside.
Yeah, that's nice. Good, so let's have a look at what's going on with us. Maya, what have you been up to? Or what
What's
are you up to?
What's going on with me? Remote Work Europe is really busy. We've launched some new communities this month already.
Wow.
We bring on new countries in a very opportunistic way because it tends to be people putting their hands up and saying, how can I do this? Why haven't you got a group in?
Yes, yes.
Well, is that where you are? Because let's talk. And so we've launched new communities in Belgium, Cyprus and Turkey in the last week or so, which is really interesting. There's small groups at the moment, but that's where we all start. And they're also different in terms of their remote work cultures and what kind of industries they attract, whether they're attracting entrepreneurs or employees, whether people are seeking out those locations as digital nomad destinations and bringing the work with them. So really interesting. We've got a great new bunch of people who are heading up those communities. So I'm really excited to see what they're going to make. We've also got somebody new who's taken on the Italy group. It's all going really great. Remote Work Europe Connected is also going well, our premium community. So that's now open on a rolling basis.
Mm-hmm.
We
so
had
you
it
can
on
just
a
join.
launch. Yeah, so remoteworkeurope.eu/connected if you want more support and connection with your remote work journey. But we will always have the social media, which is always there for conversation, free forever. Just join in and get your questions answered, start a conversation in the country where you live. But it's great to have the premium connection too. And we also have a jobs feed on the website now, which is very exciting. We've just launched that this week. It's a collaboration with EU Remote Jobs. So all our country pages now have an updated feed of fully remote vacancies, which you can apply to from that country. They're pre-selected so that if you're on the Italy page, all the jobs are open to people who are resident in Italy, as opposed to some of the job boards you go to and they say they're remote or work from anywhere, but then you sift through and you have to be in a certain state in the US or whatever. So we wanted to find a partner who could provide that data in a way that was truly relevant to Europe.
Wow. And remind us of the URL.
It's remoteworkeurope.eu. Not EU in a political sense.
just .eu.
.eu. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of the Belgium group and the home of the EU.
And one question. So you have a Facebook group, but do you have a different Facebook group for each country?
A different group for each country, yes.
And do you have one collective one, or is that the connection?
No, we don't. We have a page that kind of glues them together. But to be honest, most of the content that's for everybody will be on the website. We also have Diana, who runs the UK group and is my queen of social media. She's also looking after the LinkedIn page, Twitter, and I believe they don't tell anybody we're on TikTok now as well, but I haven't even looked. So.
With the kids, the new generation.
Yeah, I'm definitely not dancing.
That's great. That's really, really good. Well, I'm not on TikTok. I keep podcasting. I'm still there. I recently recorded with Gianna Barrett for the Remotely Cultured podcast, which she was in January. She was one of our guests in January, and then I went on her, and it was really lovely to be in the show of a guest. It's great to be there.
It's a lovely name for a show. I like Remotely Cultured.
Yes, it's really nice, and we had a really, really long conversation on asynchronous communication. It's been a while since I had that, which reminds me, listeners, we have a Navigating Asynchronous Communication for Managers and Leaders of Remote Teams. You can find it on the website. It's an audio first course. I need to plug it a lot more.
Yes, it's really good.
And also, I was, the episode of Remote Work Life podcast with Alex Wilson has just come out. And I am really excited about it because I listened back to it. I don't usually listen back to the podcast where I guest, but I listened back because I remembered it became a very personal conversation. And I thought it was great. It was, I think at some point, do listen to it if you haven't had enough of my voice. But Alex is a great host, and he just managed to get me to talk about things I haven't talked before on a podcast. So,
get behind the scenes with Pilar, folks. So. I'll have to have a listen to that one. So,
it was nice. It was nice. Listeners, we'd love to hear about. Oh, the other thing. Sorry, I have to say very quickly that the other thing that I did this month that I haven't done before is I created a solo episode which covers the listening and reading recommendations that I cover in the newsletter. So listeners, if you want more of that, and then a personal update of what I'm up to as well. So that's a short solo episode.
So it's like a little podcast in the newsletter just for people who read the newsletter.
No, it's in the feed.
Oh, okay.
But you can also find it in the newsletter as well. Yeah, because I thought
it's all the apps and all the platforms doing all the things.
We're
A
everywhere.
newsletter is morphing into a podcast and vice versa. Isn't it great?
It's both. Yes. So anyway, before we continue redefining media, listeners, do let us know what you're up to. If you have any listening or reading recommendations, we'd love to know. You can email me, pilar@virtualnotdistant.com, and virtualnotdistant.com for the contact form. Maya, anything you want to say to listeners apart from remoteworkeurope.eu?
Remoteworkeurope.eu. Yes, love to hear from you there. There's a contact form there as well.
Yay. Okay, listeners, thank you for listening. A big thank you for listening to the 21st Century Work Life podcast. We know there are many other shows for you to choose from. Remember to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, and you can check out the full show notes over at virtualnotdistant.com/podcasts. Talking of podcasts, we have another show you can listen to, Management Cafe, which you should also be able to find on all podcast apps. I have been Pilar Ortiz. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, enjoy.